Are we celebrating that? Celebrating 250, Mala?
Let's try to celebrate at least.
Yeah,
For the good parts, the good
The
part.
good parts, yes, the good
yeah,
parts.
yes,
What we'd
indeed.
like it to be.
Yes.
Yeah. So should we have a party? I didn't bring a cake this morning.
We're all used to having virtual cakes, you know. That's the only kind that doesn't make us put on weight.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We are recording. Um, so just so you all know. So this morning we have several things that we want to hear about today. Um, and Randy, I don't know if you want to start with kind of what's the latest, what's happening. Or Mala, do you need to go? Are you going to need to leave us?
No, 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 no. I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
Okay, yeah. So
Well,
so
go ahead,
adding
Randy.
adding 2 week intervals gives us more news.
Yeah.
So I'll just run through the stuff that's been on my list. So one of the very interesting things is
Excuse me, Randy,
oh
just
yeah, I'm
one
sorry.
second. So 1 second that so as Randy indicated, 2 weeks. Well, a lot can happen in Washington in 2 weeks. It's scary, but it is what it is. And so, as I think you all know, Randy, he's been here many, many times, and really has his pulse on what's happening in Washington and in other parts of the country. So we're always pleased to have Randy kind of give us an update on what's going on. So with that, Randy, I'll turn it back to you.
Good. Okay. No, thanks, Steve. Yeah. So one of the areas that's been a lot of activity is the USF contribution gets recalculated each quarter, and right now all of the different segments that are funded by the USF are sort of under review or have some sort of NPRM or something. And Mala will tell us a lot about E-rate, which is also a big firestorm. Okay, but we'll come back to that. And then also they have a high rate USF reform NPRM. So basically they're asking a lot of fundamental questions like, do these programs make sense? And, do you fund at, capital upfront or recurring OpEx, and, which of the programs are appropriate? I've been on a couple different calls, either from groups trying to figure out how to respond to that, or people who have interests in these areas. And there's a lot of money that flows to rural areas through USF, but it's really, really complicated. Which programs should stay or be or what. There are a lot of moving parts there. So that's one thing. There's also a lifeline reform NPRM that also came out and is asking sort of fundamental questions. Um, so those are two pieces. There's also on the bead front, something that people have been looking for is, when are we going to hear about the use of the extra non-infrastructure funds? So there was a House oversight hearing on the 30th, and Ariel Roth basically said this summer. So it's a pushing out a little bit, but still being discussed. Also,
It's only a little delayed from February when they were supposed to. Go
yeah,
ahead.
yeah,
Oh, sorry, Randy. Go ahead.
yeah, and then on just beat in general. So California and Illinois are the two states that don't have an NTIA approved plan. There are a couple other states that are waiting for NIST approval or other things. Like the GAO, the General Accounting Office, has sent a letter to the NTIA, sort of reminding them that they've accomplished one of 11 priorities that the GAO had kind of asked. And there are a bunch of things. Like one is kind of a broader spectrum policy. The other that they want to have done. Kind of another is just better coordination of broadband programs across agencies, and I'm not sure. None of these are easy things to do. The let's see. Another thing is the Senate passed what's called the map for broadband funding on June 22nd by a voice vote. So it's basically just asking for a review of the mapping process. And what's interesting to me is it didn't apparently wasn't very controversial because it's just a voice vote and it's like here, and then it's done. So that was so those were all brewing. There was also actually a nice thing that New America did a couple days ago on sort of satellite policy. So next year is the World Radio Conference, which is where the ITU coordinates spectrum around the world, and sort of LEO versus GEO is one of the hot topics, and they're trying to get a consolidated U.S. position. And so that's, I'm sure we'll hear more about that. There's also sort of an interesting piece that SpaceX during their right around their IPO, Glenn Shotwell, their president, talked about Globalstar having something with mobile, and of course they do direct to mobile already, and so do other satellite providers. But it sounds like there's sort of a potentially a competitive interest between the LEO providers including Amazon, who bought Globalstar, possibly and terrestrial broadband or cellular providers, and sort of the relationship there, which historically been sort of very supportive. It could become more competitive, so that's something to watch. And then a few other things on sort of corporate M&As. There are some bankruptcies and some mergers and some splits. So basically, Dish Wireless and Dish DBS filed for bankruptcy, and also let's see, Sci-Fi Networks, which is a open access provider, also filed a Chapter 11. Carter and Charter and Cox have been trying to merge, and so they just got an approval from the California Public Utility Commission, and then also Comcast and NBC Universal / Sky have been trying to are splitting. So if you recall, there was a period where basically telecom interests and media interests were starting to converge. This is now unwinding that, and which sort of is cleaner. And apparently, their stock price moved upward on the announcement, so that was a good thing. So I think those were most of the things on my radar screen. And Steve, did I miss stuff? And then Nimala, we've got a ton on E-rate.
I don't think so. And yeah, we're going to hear from Mala about what's happening with E-rate, because that's a big thing happening right now. But Randy, you had talked about trying to look at the Fed at the U.S. at that national convening.
Oh yeah.
And looking, and if I saw correctly, it wasn't just the U.S. having an agreement, but it was actually a universal agreement across many countries. Am I correct about that?
Absolutely, no, completely correct. And so here's what's interesting is, and even the U.S. So basically, the World Radio Conference coordinates spectrum issues that have global implications, and for LEO satellite in particular, it's spectacularly important. And what's interesting is in the U.S. We can sort of do our own thing because North America is big, and we've got sort of a neighbor to the north, a neighbor to the south, but the border areas are small. In a lot of other places, like in Europe and particularly landlocked countries, it's harder to do that. So what the ITU decides is more consequential.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Randy? Bill, do you want to add anything to any of that? What's happening in the wireless space these days? Bill DiAugustino, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah.
The only thing, and I joined just while Randy was in the middle of that, so I'm not sure if you talked about some of the spectrum auctions that have recently completed, and then that they're taking a look at some other bands to bring to auction. So that's starting to fuel the wireless space quite a bit more.
Yeah, no, that's a huge point, and I left that out. So that, and maybe say something about I think it's the upper C. Is that right?
Yeah, some more additional C-band, I think, just completed, and then I want to say they were looking at the uh, 1.5 as the next band. I'll pull that up while we're on this call, and I'll put it in the chat.
Okay, so thanks, Bill. Anything
You're
else,
welcome.
Bill?
No, I think that's it.
Okay.
I
Randy,
was going to ask Randy a question. Oh,
go ahead. Sure, go ahead, Henry.
yeah, I was just wondering, Randy, who coordinates the number of LEO satellites that are allowed to be launched around the world? The radio conference, I assume, doesn't do that. There must be some other UN organization.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. As far as I know, and I've talked to, there's a gentleman at Harvard that tracks all the sort of everything that's been launched, and we've had a good conversation like a year ago when I wrote the white paper. I don't believe there is an organization that does that. I think national regulators authorize it, so the FCC can, but no, it's a really good point because someone should, but I'm not sure that there's a body that I'm aware of that does that.
It seems to me it's going to be an important issue as these LEO satellite providers in different countries, particularly in the US, but I know other countries like China and so on are interested in launching a lot of LEO satellites. So there's going to be some international coordination of how many they allow up there, and seems to be something they've got to start working on at some point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, otherwise it's going to be crowded skies.
Yeah. All right.
So, Randy, I think you touched on this a little bit. And Bill, if you have anything else to add about Starlink and getting into the cellular business, and just they're looking at different options of buying a company, buying somebody, doing their own thing, doing nothing. Where right now, that's all just kind of hanging out there, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I think that's my interpretation. Right, but right now, I think so. Starlink, before their IPO, bought some spectrum, so they now have, and they spent 10 or 20 billion for a big chunk of spectrum. So that's stirred some interest. The other thing that's brewing too is in Europe. They're starting to think about this, and they're thinking about digital sovereignty issues, and there's been a certain amount of pushback in Europe about all the big tech companies, American big tech companies, dominating their landscape like they do here and they do elsewhere. And so I think there's also a kind of a question of, do they want to put up some sort of LEO system? But they're pretty late in the game right now with Starlink up there, Amazon coming. There's always room for more, but it's going to be a relatively crowded field. So how that plays out is still TBD.
Okay. Any other questions or comments for Randy before we move on? Hearing none, we will move on. I'm sorry. So, Suraj, and I know you go by a different name, but you were with the Department of Education. We haven't seen you in a while. You have anything that you want to share with us today?
Hey, Steve. So I should go by Sam. Sorry, I don't think I
Sam,
changed it on here.
I have a good memory. It's just a little short, Sam.
No worries, no worries. I know it's been a while since I've been able to jump on. No
Yeah.
real updates as of right now. I know that there are some conversations going around the E-rate and kind of what they want to do with it, and there's possibly going to be a vote towards that, but don't have too much details on it. I know Beth is closely watching that, so just
Well,
waiting on updates from that.
we're going to hear from Mala in just a couple minutes about all that's happening with that. So
Perfect.
I'm
That
sorry.
is,
Anything else, Sam?
nope, that was everything that I have.
Okay. Well, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Yeah, haven't seen you in a while. And Tony, haven't seen you in a while. Good to see you.
Yeah, hey, right. Yeah, I know it's been a lot going on, but glad to be here.
Good. Okay, well, let's jump in with Mala because that's probably one of the biggest and most important things that's happening right now is the whole issue with E-rate. So Mala, you're on.
Thank you. I'm Mala Muralidharan. I'm the State E-rate Administrator for Public Libraries. Work with the State Library. Did I pass that test, Steve? I usually
Yes,
forget.
you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
Thank you. Okay. I think a couple of days ago, Steve sent out a newsletter. I don't know how many of you have had a chance to read it, but I'm going to summarize it and see how we can move forward in saving E-rate, as I'd like to call it. This whole thing is about raising awareness. I'm not advocating for or against anything. We're not allowed to do that. So here I am just helping you with information, and it's up to you to decide what you'd like to do with it. Recently, FCC had an initiative that could dramatically impact how E-rate moves forward with schools and libraries. There are a few things that I'd like to discuss today, and one of them is the 70-page draft notice of proposed rulemaking that was approved on the 25th. And then I want to talk to you about what Shelby and ALA are doing about it, and a survey that I'd like all of us who are stakeholders to take. The survey is put forth by Funds for Learning, and I'll talk to you more about it. The proposal, the way the NPRM works, the FCC's NPRM is Notice of Proposed Rulemaking. The way it normally works is that they put up a draft proposal, they have a discussion, and then they approve it. So that part of it is done on the 25th of June. The next part that they normally do is they invite initial comments on these, and usually they give you about 120 days to comment, and then there's a 30-day period when there are reply comments that would be due, and after that, as quickly or slowly as they can, they will put it forth for voting and then agree or disagree to everything that has been suggested. As you know, and as we are all aware, that the midterms are approaching, so the FCC is pushing this through as quickly as they can. So now, instead of 120 days after it is on the Federal Register, and it's not yet on the Federal Register, but as soon as it is on the Federal Register, that means it gets a number and becomes officially published. This time they're giving us a 30-day comment period and another 30 days for reply comments, and then they would put it to vote. They'll have a discussion at FCC and put it to vote. So the timeline is considerably shortened, so which means we literally need to work on it as quickly as we can. Now, what does the proposal include? The first question is, should E-rate be sunset? The second is, and I'm summarizing only the main key points. There are lots of other things that are in between. Should E-rate be sunset, or should the program be narrowed only to rural areas and not urban areas? Has it already fulfilled its mission, what it set out to do? And as you know, that this is the 30th year of existence of E-rate. It came about through the 1996 Telecom Act, and we just had its 30th birthday, and now this comes through. Do we need to better define SIPA? SIPA is the Children's Internet Protection Act, and currently the way it's defined is that the children should not be exposed to visual depiction of adult material, but they want to narrow the definition even more and redefine what SIPA means. This is going to affect all of us, schools and libraries. Should the network and devices purchased out of E-rate funds limit screen time for kids? This we have never been policing screen time, but this is something that Ted Cruz and team has been suggesting, and Brendan Carr has taken it up in this NPRM. Should eligibility, discount rates, and even the way the contracts are bid be reconsidered? So far, there was a lot of I'd like to call it freedom in the way the contracts are written. Some of us have, state master contracts. Some of us have county master contracts. Those kind of things. We had the freedom to write it the way we wanted it. You could have a 1-year contract renewable. You could have a 3-year contract renewable. You could have a 5-year contract renewable. What kind of discount rates they provide, mass discounts or not, is up to the service provider. But the eligibility, so the list of eligible services was always something that FCC put out, and now they have put out, just as of last week, a draft eligible services list for 2027-28. So it's, again, only in the draft form. It would get finalized only after somewhere around October, when the bidding process starts for next year. So there'll be some kind of certification for consultants working to assist the E-rate program. Now, many schools and libraries really don't have the capacity to do their own E-rate. It's convoluted, it's complex, it's a multi-step process. It goes on through the year, right from the bidding to the billing. So, it's hard to keep track of when you have, when that's not your main job. As a librarian, as a school IT person, you have a lot on your plate, lots to do other than just monitor E-rate. And also they are very, very picky about the kind of questions they ask. And so there sometimes we had a trainer who used to train all of us state coordinators, and she would always tell us, if they ask you what is your name, you just say, my name is Mala. You don't say, my name is Mala Muralidharan. That's, you just answer to the point, and that's it. So it is, you need to know how to answer those questions that are asked so that it doesn't get you into more hot water. So those are things that the consultants were doing. But of course, there was no USAC certification of these consultants. There was no test that USAC had that they would administer to the consultants, nor was there an annual certification of the consultants. So now they're thinking about doing that. Again, all of this is, I wouldn't call it to streamline, but it's more on trying to curb the fraud and abuse in the program. And compared to any other program, a study was done by GAO of the last, I want to say 5 years or maybe more, and the fraud or abuse has been about less than 2%. It was less than even 1.5% of fraud or abuse in the program. And a lot of that was also because of not understanding how the system works, and new E-rate applicants not knowing if they were doing the right thing. But this program has run really well. All of the screws are tightened and have been over the last few years. So I just can't I think that's an excuse for doing what they're doing. But again, it is again one of the questions that are under consideration. So, what happens if E-rate goes away? That's the most important thing that we need to think about, because that could be a scenario. Schools and libraries will have to absorb the full cost of the internet service. I hate to imagine what that would be, because you're already working on tight budgets where the money has to come from somewhere. So what are we going to cut in order to fund the internet? Staff, programs, budgets, repairs to the building, maybe more equipment or things like that, technology and other things. We try to make do all the time, and that's not good. Schools and libraries could opt for lower bandwidth, maybe so that they would pay less for internet services because they can't afford the full price of what they need. While at the same time, the bandwidth need is increasing. It's not decreasing, it's just increasing. And the new technologies, new programs, all of them, especially after COVID, we've seen so much has moved online, and that's going to suffer. They spoke about BEAD bringing higher bandwidth to your doorstep, and that was one of the reasons they were quoting for BEAD's doing this job. So why do we need E-rate? But BEAD pays mainly for infrastructure. BEAD is not paying the recurring costs to use the infrastructure, and that's the whole purpose of increasing the bandwidth to the library or school is going to be lost, because if you have a larger pipeline coming to your doorstep and a very narrow pipeline inside, you're going to still throttle it, and it's not going to work. Pulling, again, one of the things that E-rate really, hidden benefits of E-rate was the digital divide between the rural and the urban, when you had well-resourced districts, well-resourced libraries, well-resourced schools. You help the students help themselves, and that's going to be a big problem. The BEAD program will bring internet to your doorstep at home so that you kids can do their homework. But what if the school had a lower bandwidth, and with so many children using it at the same time? That's going to create a problem. So FCC is currently seeking comments on this, and as soon as I'm done talking, I'll put the FCC NPRM number in the chat, and you can Google it and get to the site to see where you can post the comments. That's not up yet. So once it's up, you can start working on that. But also in the meanwhile, there is a survey that that's done annually by Funds for Learning. Funds for Learning has been a major player, just like Shelby, the Schools, Health, Libraries, Broadband Coalition. They've been players in the national scenario, and every year their annual survey is reviewed by FCC. So this is an opportunity for all stakeholders. You don't have to be an E-rate applicant, to take the survey, because there are some questions that the applicants can answer. I mean, applicants can answer all of the questions if they choose to, but there are some questions that even you as a stakeholder, if you're not an applicant, you have an opportunity to express your views and to talk about how useful E-rate has been, or what the consequences will be of for your organization or for your programs, for your digital initiatives, how important that is. So that's at the end of this of what I'm saying. I'll put that link again, and it's also there in the newsletter that Steve has sent around. So as of now, nothing has happened yet except this NPRM draft. So I want to put this in context and not create a panic, but it's coming. It's a proposal. It's not a decision yet. They are giving us an opportunity by asking us questions. This is our chance to put our comments and to put our views forth. And we should use this opportunity to the best of our ability, because we're only going to increase the digital divide by allowing this, their proposal to go through. Now, Shelby is going to be doing a webinar pretty soon. It's on the 16th of July. And again, I'll put that in the chat. I'll put the link for the survey also in the chat. Did anybody have any questions? Are there any suggestions on what we can do together as a group, as AZBSN, or what you can do, each of you do in your own groups?
So, Dave, we'll get to you in 1 second. But Mala, I asked you the other day about that this discussion about E-rate is or was happening in Congress, and that there was a bipartisan committee, that if I'm remembering correctly, and what you want to talk about, or Randy, whether you guys want to talk about what's the status of that committee and how does that relate to what the FCC is doing, and can the FCC pass the rules but Congress has basically no input at that point? Or I'm confused. Maybe others are, or everybody's confused.
I'll let Randy take that question and supplement it later. But Randy is very good at it. Mm-hmm.
No, I think that's a great question. I guess, and I've been really heartened by the notion that Congress has, this bipartisan group and is thinking about it. I guess with USF reform, there are two sides. There's funding reform, like who should pay, should the big internet giants, contribute and so forth, and then also how should it be spent. And I'm not totally sure what, when it gets down to the level of individual programs. Like the FCC has been asking a bunch of specific questions in each of these NPRMs, but yeah, I think it's a really good question of what is the relationship between the congressional action and the commission as this all plays out.
So if I understand correctly, the FCC theoretically could act without approval from Congress. So if they wanted to do away with E-rate, they could do away with E-rate and not have approval from Congress? Or
I mean, it's sort of from the NPRM, it kind of suggests that, but I don't know, Mala, what's your read on that?
Yeah, I think it cannot be totally done away with because it's legislative, and Congress has to approve it being completely abolished, if I may use that word, but they can modify it. FCC has the authority to modify the E-rate rules, and USAC, of course, only gives guidance to the rules that FCC approves. So it's a multi-step process. Right now, FCC has the authority to limit it. If they want to limit it to only rural areas, there's nothing that's stopping them from doing it. It doesn't require a congressional bill passed to do that, because they're not doing away with it. But if they plan to do away with E-rate completely, yes, that is a congressional bill that has to be approved.
And I guess the one other twist too is right now the USF contribution factor is really high. So there are a lot of people who are thinking, wow, this is painful if you're providing voice. And so there's pressure to dial back the dollars. And I think that's one of the areas of tension.
That's true. Although in not even 1 year, in the last like 7 or 8 years, since they reformed how Cat 2 applications, the Category 2 applications happen, that we have gone over the budget. There's normally about a 5.7, I want to say, $billion in the program. So far, only, I mean, even this year, although the application has been quite above the normal range, it's just about 3.7, 3.8 billion. So there is still a lot of money available for them to dial back if they want to, not compromising the current rules, because they roll over these funds periodically to make sure that they address. That's how they gave funds for fiber build out some years ago. And they have these new programs. The cybersecurity program, pilot program, was also because they had funding left over from the rollover funds. So there are many things that they can do with the rollover funds. They can cut back on that a little bit, but again, who am I to say what they do about it? We've got to come to a conclusion as a group nationally about what we can do without making these drastic cuts to the program.
So
Did
a
I
couple
answer
other
your
questions.
question? Yeah.
A couple other questions, Mala. And so, as far as I understand, that NTIA and FCC theoretically are separate entities.
Yes.
Do we have any sense from Muriel or anybody over at NTIA about whether they're tracking this, whether they have any thoughts, or they don't give a shit? Pardon my French.
No, they will track it. Of course, they will track it. But I think we are not there yet. We are in the early stages of it being published in the Federal Register and then being open for comments. And when they open it for comments, I'm sure all of these groups, all the stakeholders, NDIA, NTIA, all of them, USDA, will comment on it in one way, shape, or form.
Okay. Dave, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, it's really taking things a completely different direction, but it occurs to me from listening to this and looking at the researches, this was a problem that was solved. There's a very complex way to solve a problem that was solved decades ago when these kind of questions first came up through the Communications Act. And I think groups like this and anyone who wants to make this a lot more sustainable and a lot less attractive for fraudsters and stuff, because it looks like the headlines are they found some substantial fraud, and now it's at the top of the list. That they're going to do a deep dive in Minnesota, and who knows what they'll find. So, in broad strokes, this was solved in 1984 with the original Communications Act, when the federal government authorized local governments to became a franchising authority, and they could set rules for the cable companies. And the original act allowed that local entity to charge anywhere between 0 and 5% of the value of the services that were being as a franchise fee. And I'm glad Max is here because I'd like his opinion on this. But this is a system that worked very, very well for a long time. It was fair to the providers and it was fair to the consumers, and it largely left government out of it. But a franchise agreement, a well-written one in 1990, the schools and government buildings would automatically be wired and provided the service free of charge as part of the franchise agreement. So there is no reduced rate, there is nothing. So the schools that I went to all had cable, and it was free of charge under the Communications Act. Now, that worked very, very well. What happened and the act hasn't been amended, I don't think, meaningfully since 1996. So I think that there's a lot of fertile ground. Instead of setting up just a program, getting this written into an updated amendment to the Telecommunications Act, where internet access is treated more like a utility than a luxury. And so I think if it's well done, the problem and where that really started to run into trouble was when local governments started to get a little bit greedy. And in order, they started writing some horrendous and onerous things into their franchise agreements. And quite frankly, Tucson was well known as kind of one of the worst. At one point, they had written in that Cox had to provide a dozen PEG channels. The police had one, Pima College had one, the fire department had one, the schools had 3. And they had to provide equipment and all of that kind of stuff. And it was just onerous. It was not fair to the cable industry. So the cable industry started to push back. And from what I recall, it started in California. And Susan Bitter Smith, who we've mentioned on this call before, and I guess is still around, would really, she was very heavily involved in this years ago. Started in California, where they came up with this concept of a state uniform video franchise agreement that put severe limitations on what the locals could do. So we had here in Arizona, so we kind of got this 2-tiered system that I imagine Max is really familiar with when it comes to how you get licensed to do that. That being said, I think that most of the providers would be amenable to wiring government buildings, schools, and libraries just as a cost of doing business if we can get a lot of these ridiculous franchise fees and per foot easement fees and those kinds of things that have really made it way too expensive for a lot of the operators to come in. So I think really as a separate conversation, I would talk about and start talking to some of the politicians about, is there a way to update the Federal Telecommunications Act that will trickle down to the states, that find something that's fair to everybody? The goal being that the schools and the government buildings, the libraries, are automatically a part of the build out. And at that point, you know, the details can be worked out at the local level. It can be, if you get a lot more back to the local level to decide their own needs, and it's more of a negotiated thing, I think it'll work better. It certainly worked a lot better than what we have now, which is a program that's funded and then it's unfunded, and then you have a little bit of fraud over here. There's way too many cooks in this, as far as I can tell. If you look at the fraud cases that they've had, it's just layers of, well, this person applied and they really didn't qualify, but they got the money, and then they handed $14 million to a contractor that never did the work, and they got a few $100,000 in kickback. It's just a mess of fraud. So that kind of a system would eliminate all those kind of possibilities, make it very streamlined, and then make it very, very sustainable. So that being said, Max is in the business. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but my goal, and I've said this to Max early on, I want the town of Sarita to get out of the per foot easement fee business, you know, because you know, the best use as a resident here, the best use of my easement is to get the fiber in the ground. And we've got, you know, we got plenty of room, and we're not charging easement fees to the other utilities. So I don't know, Max, here, like I said, I'm really glad you're here. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I have probably days worth of thoughts on that, but I promise I'll make it short. I will say, over probably the last 5 to 10 years, we've started to see a shift in the way that municipalities go about providing a right-of-way license, and the way that those, you referenced franchise agreements, kind of same. In our case, right, I can only speak for Wired. I won't speak for some of my previous employers, but a lot of the time what we are starting to run into is municipalities that are starting to think about telecommunications in a way that's going to benefit the resident, which is an amazing thing, right? But we are still trying to I guess negotiate would be the best way to administer that right-of-way license and move away from a right-of-way per linear foot fee, which does get incredibly expensive, right? When you're putting millions of feet in the ground. And a lot of the municipalities that we work with currently are requesting services like what you just described in lieu of fashion, right? Can we get service to schools? Can we get service to community centers? Can we get service to libraries? Can we peel off a couple of pairs of fiber from your guys' network so we can have sufficient bandwidth and capability? And to your point, Dave, like the town of Sarita did exactly that, right? We're actively constructing in Sarita right now. The town will benefit from our network that we're putting in the ground, so they then can administer their own network with reliable fiber and also then feed schools, libraries, community centers, underprivileged areas that we wouldn't necessarily go into, but they've asked us to secure this right of way franchise license. And that is kind of the way that it should have been since the beginning. I mean, the Telco Act of 96 has been around for 30 plus years at this point, and it's subject to a lot of different interpretations, but in essence, it's been a really amazing shift to see over the last couple of years, specifically in Southern Arizona. I know most of us here have been stuck with one, maybe two provider options, and now that hyperscalers exist, it's really kind of changing the landscape in which these agreements are being provided to ISPs. So without going on a multi-day tangent on right-of-way licenses, I'll stop there and happy to answer any questions that people may have, or if that's sufficiently answered, I'll shut up for a bit.
That's work we can all do at the local level. And you know, I certainly will. I'm not shy about letting the mayor know what I think on some things. And I think you got a good situation here in Sarita, much better than what it would have been a few years ago. But when I first moved here, the franchise agreement was dismal. I mean, none of that stuff was written in, but at the time they just had like a general purpose attorney who was in way over his head. And
well, that's to back up just a moment. I think now we're getting into a generation of individuals who do have a general understanding of telecommunications, right? Even at the legal level, we're starting to see when we thought we would have to fight through an interpretation of the way that something was written. Oh, okay, I understand circuit switch versus light versus old coax being in the ground, right? And the way that traffic applies to right-of-way use fees, et cetera. And that's been a huge point of contention for a lot of the big carriers. And they were in TV video revenue agreements, not on telecommunications agreements. And it was just a nightmare for a really long time. And obviously that revenue has been dwindling significantly over the last 10 years with streaming, et cetera. And now they're being forced into telecommunications agreements, which is a good thing for everybody.
I think it is. And I'll leave you with this, the big problem that we had here, and originally that idea actually literally came from Barry Goldwater. He was the guy who did in '84 wanted to make sure that these things were taken care of and got the pay channel. So it actually came out of Arizona, but we found way too many places where these fees were literally, and this was the case in Sarita up until recently, it just went into the general fund. So we had millions and millions of dollars at the height of cable that were going into the general fund, and at that point you have no idea where they go. But I'm happy to help however I can contribute. But like I said, my advice would be to settle this permanently one and for all. Try to get some of this stuff written into the Telecommunications Act. It's long overdue. You're going to have a lot of support from consumers, and I think they'll be glad to talk to their legislators. And if you can get this problem solved once, instead of this patchwork of everybody that I talked to, even on multiple other projects, are running into the same thing outside of this area. Well, we had a grant to do this. Now, because of fraud over here, now they're all old. And if we can get this on more stable ground, I'm glad to start the conversations with some of the legislators I know here. And see if we can get that going. But
Well, one thing that's to where the world has changed a lot, which we all know, is when a lot of those franchise agreements were done years ago, people didn't even know what broadband was. And for a lot of the cities at that time, that they saw it as a source of revenue and was focused primarily on TV and not really focused on broadband. And the other, I mean, one of the things that is very clear is when COVID hit, people finally began to recognize how important broadband was. And that has really changed the dialogue dramatically in many places. And so, Molly, you have something? Was somebody else going to say something? I thought I heard somebody else commenting. Mala?
No, what I wanted to say was while I agree with what Dave and Max are saying, the majority of what E-rate provides for is the recurring costs of using the internet, not in the build-out process. The build-out process, sometimes the rollover funds help with that, but generally speaking, annually, E-rate supports the recurring internet usage, reimburses them, and that also based on the poverty level. So when they're trying to narrow the program down or to say that we don't need it anymore because it's met its purpose, I beg to defer. We need it even more now because of the usage of broadband in schools and libraries and homes and everywhere else. And a lot of people actually, those that don't have the bandwidth that they need at home to take classes or to do other things, come to the library to do it. They come to the library for telehealth appointments if they don't have sufficient bandwidth or privacy to do it at home. So, cutting this off at this stage is actually widening the digital divide rather than trying to bridge it.
Well, and just to be clear, those earlier franchise agreements that they were run, that was not just the build out. The service was included in that. The school paid no additional monthly fee for it or to do straight. So that was simply part of it. And the whole concept of peg channels needs to be rethought because the peg channels were totally free. In your public access and those kinds of things, those were totally free. You would get handed a free television channel. But
Right.
but with internet streaming, they're just not used. I don't know where Tucson sits anymore, but at one point they had a dozen individual channels, and I don't think that any of them are even on anymore. I don't know if the one government channel is. They don't actually show that down here, but no, to be clear that a well-written agreement is not just for the build out. It does include the service. And there were limits. The school would get basic cable. They wouldn't get the top packages. They wouldn't get HBO and Cinemax and all that kind of stuff. It would get the basics. But I don't see that a basic service level of internet would be out of the question. Again, Max would be the one to answer that. But yeah, I would, and so literally it would be. I think if it was done well, and certainly there'd be a lot of work to do, it would kind of be a one-for-one replacement. But it would include the service.
Yeah, and I do agree that it should include the service, and it's not structured that way in a lot of franchise agreements currently. I think the other thing that we haven't touched on, the elephant in the room, is that some of the larger carriers, the incumbents, are still bidding $800+ for E-rate service to schools that have existing coax or existing fiber, and that's just ridiculous at this point, right? There's no reason why it should be as expensive as it is, creating a need for reimbursement for a school district to be able to afford, high-speed broadband. And same thing for community centers and libraries. So I will leave that there and die on that hill all day long.
Yeah, Sarita High School originally, when we first moved here, was up against a bill of about $80,000 to get from the street to the main office. That was back when Dr. St. John was like, yeah, how did you get yourself in this situation? It was just a very badly written franchise agreement.
Well, they have a beautiful handhold with my fiber sitting in front of it right now. So that bill will no longer be what it was 20 years ago.
We'll get you I'm going to get you a special citation at the State of the Town event coming up, like a special award.
Okay, let's move on. Anybody else have any updates or briefings or Michelle, you got anything happening that you want to talk about?
So you caught me right as I was typing. I have another meeting to go to.
Okay.
It starts at 9 o'clock.
Okay.
I will send you the link to that interview that I did with KOLD if you want to share it with everybody.
Yeah, sure.
I think it was pretty exciting for us to get to talk about what's happening in Pima County and the AARP grants. And Max and I are great buddies. We talk all the time about
We
all
sure
the
do.
things. So yeah, all the conversations that are happening are very helpful, and I will continue to reach out to everybody. Okay, so you guys take care. Bye.
Thanks, Michelle.
One last thing for Max. I don't know if you caught the news here, and I don't know a whole lot of it, but this data center meeting was held.
I saw that a meeting was held. I did not
Yeah.
see how it went.
Well, you can read it, the Green Valley News. I wasn't there, but the headline is, it was contentious, and it's contentious.
I believe it.
That being said, the original area that they're looking at is not far from where I last saw your truck. So I don't know where you fit in there. Trico kind of gave their position on it, but it's in the Green Valley News right now. You might want to take a look at that.
I don't want to get into a whole discussion about.
Nope. I'm not touching that hot potato.
About those issues.
No, it's just that the timing is, for me, it's like,
Sure.
oh, what's next? But
Yeah.
but you can get a feeling for what's going on there.
Yeah. So Tony, we haven't seen you for a while. Obviously, lots is happening in the cybersecurity space. You want to share anything, make any comments, talk about what you're doing?
No, you're right. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of governance and things changing, especially as of July 1st with certain things. I would just say be mindful. But everything that everybody covered today actually touches on some of the gaps that are going to be created and some of the exposures that we'll have with that digital divide and the worrisome part about it. So I what I'm working on right now is more so still providing and trying to close that gap with mobile devices and giving people mobility and opportunities to not have to necessarily only use just the library. But I'll have more updates maybe later this month when I come to I'll be up in Tucson in August. I think it's Phoenix maybe, but I'll have more for the next call.
Okay. Thanks, Tony. It was good to see you. Yeah. Anybody have anything else? Aaron? Anybody have anything more before we wrap it up for today? Aaron, just so quiet today.
Well, this one isn't really as close to my stuff anymore, but I hope you're having a great time on the West Coast, Steve.
Yeah, I am. It was 56 degrees this morning. Hopefully it's going to be warmer later today. Anyway, so listen, everybody, have a safe holiday.
Did you feel the earthquake where you were?
No.
Oh, okay.
At least not that I'm aware of. Okay, well, I think we're done for today, unless anybody has anything else that they want to comment on. We will see you in 2 weeks. Not next week, in 2 weeks. Kind of unusual. Kind of get used to this every 2 weeks thing. Made my life easier, particularly with the being on vacation. So.
Now you got one more thing to remember. Is it the week or the week?
Well, I got it on my calendar, so. Okay.
Bye.
Well, we'll see you all in a couple of weeks. Have a safe and fun holiday, 4th of July, regardless of what's happening in Washington.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay. Bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye.